In this movie, I'll show you how Quilt Warp actually works, and I'll demonstrate when you might want to use it as well. So here we are looking at a wide-angle shot that I captured as a raw image, incidentally, captured with a Tokina wide-angle lens and a focal length of 10 millimeters. So it's really a fisheye shot, and as a result, we have this bowing associated with the horizon. In other words, we have barrel distortion. Now, at this point, I haven't corrected for the distortion at all. I was able to correct the distortion inside Camera Raw by cranking the lens correction option all the way up to 120%, at which point I end up with this flat horizon. But we've got a few problems. For example, these two buttes, the one on the left and the right, are slanting outward. Sam is stretched horizontally, and this little cairn right here, which should be straight up and down, is almost diagonal. Now, I can take care of the buttes. I can make them nice and vertical using the transform tool inside Camera Raw, which ended up giving me this effect right here. So notice the buttes now are straight up and down, which is great. Sam is still stretched horizontally. This cairn is hopeless. We're not going to be able to fix it. But the really bad news is that I've exaggerated the size of the foreground like crazy, and I've taken a lot of the magic out of this scene. So what I decided to do was abandon the transform tool and correct the lens distortion to 50%, which leaves me with some barrel distortion, as you can see right here. Sam is still a little bit stretched, but I can take care of these issues using Quilt Warp. And so this really is the kind of shot that previous to Photoshop 2020, I couldn't correct the way I wanted to. All right, so let me show you how to approach this image. Right now, we're just looking at a JPEG version of the file. I need an independent layer, so I'll go ahead and double-click on the background over here in the Layers panel, and I'll call this new layer Vista, let's say. And then, as opposed to going to the Filter menu and looking for something called Quilt Warp, you want to go to the Edit menu and choose one of two options. You can either drop down to Transform and then choose Warp, and you'll go directly to the Quilt Warp feature, or you can choose Free Transform, which has the advantage of that keyboard shortcut of Control-T here on the PC or Command-T on the Mac. Then, go ahead and click on the Warp icon up here in the Options bar. So again, if you chose the Warp command from the Transform submenu, you'll go directly to this mode right here. At which point, notice this grid setting. That is new, and that is Quilt Warp. You can change it to a default setting, such as, in my case, where this image is concerned, 4x4 is going to work out nicely because that gives us a row very close to the horizon. And now you can select a point and drag it to a different location if you like. Or, here's the better way to work. I'll go ahead and undo that change by pressing Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac, and I will spacebar drag upward so I can gain access to that point. Make sure that the grid option is no longer active here on the PC, not an issue on the Mac, but on the PC, you've got to press the Enter key so that that guy is no longer highlighted. And then you can nudge that point by pressing an arrow key on the keyboard. Or if you want to nudge in 10x increments, then press Shift along with an arrow key. And so in my case, I'm pressing Shift down arrow in order to flatten that horizon. And that's all it takes. And the great thing about that is I can just flatten that one area of horizon without harming the rest of the image. All right, now I want to go ahead and make Sam a little less wide. And so I'll select this point right here, and I'll press Shift left arrow twice in order to scoot that region over. Then I'll click on this point to the left of Sam, and I'll press Shift right arrow once in order to scoot this region over. You can also just drag directly inside the image if you want to, but that kind of reduces the level of precision, which rather ruins the point. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. Notice this butte is leaning over to the left, and so I'll select this point right here and press Shift right arrow in order to scoot it over. Another thing that troubles me about this image is that this mesa right here is kind of leaning down. It's a little bit gooey. I'm not sure if that's the way it's really supposed to look, but I can get rid of that effect by selecting this point right here. So notice I can drag it if I want to, but I'm going to end up manipulating the edge of the image, which is not what I want. So I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that guy, and I'll press Shift up arrow twice in order to raise that point and more or less flatten that mesa. All right, now I'll go ahead and scoot over to this area right here, and I'll select this point. Now this time I don't want to press Shift left arrow, even though I do want to nudge that guy over. That's too much. So press Control Z, Command Z on the Mac to undo that. And I'll press the arrow key, the left arrow key, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, let's say. And if that's too much, then I could just press the right arrow key to nudge it back a little bit. And then I'll select this point right here. And I want you to notice that we also have these control handles that you can drag around. That is going to warp that section of the image, and it's going to warp the edge, which is not what I want. So I'll undo that change. And instead, I'll drag this guy straight in like so, and just take care not to move it down or up. So just go ahead and drag it to the left in this case, and just take care to make sure that you don't mess things up. If you want more precision still, you can go ahead and zoom in, and that way at 100%, you'll see whether your lever is off a little bit. And so I'll just drag this handle down in order to make sure that it's exactly in line with that row. And now I'll press Control 0 or Command 0 on the Mac to zoom out. And I'll go ahead and accept my changes either by clicking on this check mark up here in the options bar, or you can just press the Enter key here on the PC or the Return key on the Mac. All right, now I'll press Shift F in order to fill the screen with the image. And I'll go ahead and zoom on in as well. And just so we can see what we've been able to achieve here, I'll press Control Z or Command Z on the Mac so that we can see the before version of the image with the bowing horizon and the very wide version of Sam. And then if I press Control Shift Z or Command Shift Z on the Mac, this is the after image with the less stretched Sam, a much flatter horizon, and the straight up and down buttes. Thanks to the power of Quilt Warp, my favorite new feature of Photoshop 2020.